me your initial reactions. Iowa wins 24-14, and it was a battle the entire way through. Not the type of win Iowa fans were hoping for, but a win is a win.
You're right. It reminded me, it was kind of an old-fashioned football game. Both teams were hoping to establish the run. Sadly, we had a lot of difficulty in doing so. Thank God we didn't forget about one option being just to try to throw it over their head. That seemed to work pretty well. And it's frustrating, when you sputter on offense, but I give Colorado State a lot of credit for that. I'll remind people that they held Toledo to 6 points last weekend. So it's not as if we're going up against a bunch of Humpties. These guys are big and strong and very motivated to play in front of 70,000. They don't get that opportunity very often.
One of the major storylines, at least with the fans here early, Don, we've had a lot of comments already on the show. People are frustrated, I think primarily with Spencer. But here's my thing. Spencer played better today, didn't he? I mean, he hit on more. Obviously, he hit on more passes down the field than he has all season. They seem to finally get a receiver to emerge that is capable of taking the top off the defense in Keegan Johnson. We hope that continues. But didn't Spencer play better today? Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, it's hard for me to say that for sure, but I see the same plays that upset the fans. I see those same plays too, and some of them are head scratchers. You think about it. If you take away a couple of deep throws that we're able to hit with our freshmen, our numbers would look pretty pathetic at that point. If you didn't have what were those two plays worth? 100 yards.
Keegan Johnson. Let me pop up Keegan Johnson's stats here, Don. I don't have the numbers. He had 2 receptions for 92 yards. So
yeah. So where are we without those 92 yards? Thank God for a couple of go routes.
But you got to give Spencer credit for hitting them, right, Don? I mean, he did hit those passes on the money.
If you wanted to grade him on the variety of passes you have to throw in a game, the best grade he would get would be for the go routes, the up and over throws. They showed good touch, good distance. Receiver didn't have to slow it much at all. Couldn't throw him much better. So that was the best thing Spencer did today, is throw the deep ball. I flashed back on a guy years and years ago. If there are any listeners that are my age, they might remember a guy that played for the Oakland Raiders years ago by the name of Daryl LaMonica, and they called him the Mad Bomber. You'd have to be a Raiders fan, I guess, to know all that. But for a second, I flashed back to Daryl LaMonica from the Oakland Raiders and his ability to throw the ball deep. And so that's the best thing Spencer did today, is throw the deep ball.
And Don, one of the comments that I did not agree with, and I'm not trying to pick on James, but this was a comment made earlier. He says, do you think no other QB on the roster could hit guys that are wide open? Here's my problem with that question. We had a quarterback in Nate Stanley who consistently had problems hitting on deep routes. So it is possible to not – it's not like, anybody and everybody is going to be able to hit a wide open go route. Spencer made those throws, didn't underthrow, didn't overthrow. He did have a couple pass plays that were, the high throw to Laporta. I think it was in the second quarter.
Right.
There was way too much steam behind that ball. And then he had a ball. I thought it was going to be a touchdown, honestly, to Sam Laporta that he overthrew.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of the one in the dirt.
That one, Don, and I know you were at the game, that one, he was hit on the follow-through because that was a bad throw, but he was hit by the defensive lineman on the follow-through. His arm got hit. So
gotcha.
I think that certainly was the reason for that grounder. But there was a play earlier in the game on a deep route for Sam that Spencer overthrew that probably would have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
But I just don't think you can't just guarantee that any other quarterback on this roster would be able to make those open throws.
Well, let's back up. Let's back up if we can, Corey. One of the complaints I had from time to time with Nate is because he overthrew deep receivers that were open.
Yes.
And for that matter, let's think back to last fall with Spencer. Spencer, if you go back and look at the games, there were some overthrown deep balls a year ago. So at the very least, we have to give him credit for maybe solving that problem. It wasn't a problem today. Pressured us more, I think, than what they've shown on previous games. I think Kirk thought maybe it was going to be 35% pressure. Maybe it was higher than that. Kirk at least thought so. I heard that comment from Kirk after the game.
But it did seem like in the second half, Phil figured whatever it was that was causing Centeo to consistently get open space, and McBride he's just a load at tight end. But Iowa seemed to figure out how to contain both guys in the second half.
I don't think I've ever seen so many nakeds in one football game as today. That's just a big part of what they do. And we hit them with quite a few nakeds also. So it was play action roll passes away from the play action any number of times for both teams. I think we got a little bit drunk on trick plays there for a while. We ran the one that bit us in the butt really was the fumbled exchange, of course, to Charlie that took us back out of the red zone. At least we got 3 out of that drive, as I recall. And that was a big 3 because 10 points looks a lot different than 7.
Right. Charles Penster comments here, Don, that he believes Spencer needs to learn to step up in the pocket. We talked about this earlier. He seems to be getting more pressure from the outside than the inside. I know that's maybe a juvenile thing to observe, but would that be accurate in saying that most of the pressure is coming from the tackles?
I think so. I think you got to realize that if it's a typical 4-man rush, it doesn't really matter if it's a 3-down front or a 4-down front. If you're playing with 3-down linemen, the odds are you're going to rush an outside linebacker from one side or the other to equate to the same 4-man rush that you got out of 4-down fronts. So if you think about a typical 4-down front or just a 4-man rush, wherever it might come from, the guys that are isolated one-on-one are the offensive tackles. Those inside rushers, if you think about it, we've got a center and 2 guards to account for 2 down guys. And the way pass protection works, those 2 guys that are playing with their hands on the ground, we have to be responsible for them. But logically, of course, our 5 need to be able to block 5 defenders, 4 of which we expect to come, 1 of which we don't think is coming. So typically, the center and the guard, one side or the other, will work the down guy up to a linebacker, if that makes sense to you. So the guys that have difficulty, the tackles are both one-on-one. We'll get into chip as an option a little bit later. And the other guy that's really got his hands full is typically an offensive guard versus a 3 technique. I don't know if you know what a 3 technique is, Corey. It's a guy that lines up outside shade of an offensive guard. So he's sitting in what we call he's defending the B gap. The A gap is center guard gap. The B gap is guard tackle gap. So if I'm a left guard and there's a 3 technique sitting out here on my outside shoulder, I'm going to have to block him one-on-one.
Okay.
It's logical that we would do it that way because on the other side of the ball, if you just move from the left guard over to the right guard position, there's probably a defensive lineman sitting there in that A gap. In other words, he's in the gap between the center and the right guard. If he's sitting there, then you can bet that the pass protection, the normal way to do it, would be for us to account for the guy there in the A gap and have our eyes up to protect against a guy that's at the next level, one of those linebackers. So that's how protection works. And that puts a little pressure on the tackles, obviously, because they don't have any help. And that's where you get into chipping with a back. A back to that side might be instructed, go ahead, and the tackle knows when he has help. Of course, it's part of the game plan. So that the back gets set up, and if the guy's trying to beat our tackle up the field, then obviously that back can sit there, and you can't be real aggressive because you don't want to knock the guy off with the tackle, but you're simply funneling him back onto the tackle, if you will. You're stunting his charge and helping the tackle to recover. And for that matter, when the tackle's in good shape, you go ahead and release into your route. You're just talking about chipping on the guy. If you get to him before the tackle does, that's fine too. You just blunt his progress and give our tackle an easier assignment than what he would otherwise have.